Will, where are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from Gainesville, Florida. I'll be here until Friday, and then I'm moving. Sadly, I'm excited to be at the place I'm going, but I hate leaving anywhere. So just
Oh,
trying not to think about it for now.
oh, where's the new place you're going? Is it exciting?
To me it is. It's and a lot of this is about it. It's well, I'll be back up in Maryland. Southern Maryland is home. And so I'll be around a lot of good friends and family and whatnot. Um, so excited there. Don't want to leave. Edward Sombrano is here. It's my best friend down here. I'm sad to leave that person. So uh yeah, I'm happy to be Gainesville for now.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've like lived here my whole life and I wish I had moved somewhere at some point and tried that whole challenge of rebuilding yourselves and making connections and support systems. I don't know. Maybe it's just a cool's way of saying I might not survive. But my daughter lives in Maryland and she's here for the summer with my grandson. And so, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Where at in Maryland, if you don't mind my asking?
Canton?
Canton. Okay.
Canton. It's kind of
Not
like, I'm not really sure where it is. It's kind of like, there's a bay, there's a pier. But yeah, it's nice.
I'm gonna look it up right now if you don't
Okay. Yeah.
mind. Let's see. I'm always interested in where people are from, and I don't know. I tend to make a lot of weird connections. I've lived in a lot of places, most all in the U.S. But okay, so your daughter is right, sort of in the Baltimore area, kind of on the bay. Okay. Um, I've lived in a lot of places in the U.S., so I end up making a lot of strange connections with a lot of people. I once re-met my best friend in third grade in Washington State over in Maryland in high school at a track meet. I don't find it too trivial asking where people are from and whatnot. Maybe I'll run
Wow.
these days.
So
Yeah, it
like I
sounds like,
live,
oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I didn't realize, yeah, we have two poets tonight in Florida and in Hawaii. So that is quite the spread. And then everywhere in between, I'm dialing in from Houston, Texas. So
Oh, nice.
All
Nice.
right.
Yeah.
We
Well,
got
our island is like 42 miles wide. And again, lived there my whole life. And it's really strange how you never circle around and meet like re-meet your classmates from high school or from the university in all my decades of living on this island. It's just weird how people just kind of stay in their own navigational or migrational patterns here.
the best friend I mentioned, I was friends with him when I was very young on an out in Puget Sound, Washington State, called Fidalgo Island. And yeah, I re-met him across the country, and then I was telling the longer version of that to someone I met at the Naval Academy summer some years back. And you have people that from all over the country. And I happened to room with someone else from Maryland. I was telling him the long version of the story, and he said, "Oh, no shit! I was standing right next to all this happened."
well, we are pretty much ready to go now. We have our Facebook live broadcast connected, and I'm going to resume the recording for this as well. So that's going. And I'm going to kick things off with some introductions. And I'm just so glad that you both could join us for this episode 160, I believe, of Poets in Pajamas. If folks joining in are not familiar with the format, each of the poets here tonight will read for about 15 minutes. And then we will finish the reading with a QA for both Will and Shareen. So please use the chat or just come off mute and ask questions. Don't be shy. We'll have time for everybody. And if anyone needs a written copy of the poems that are being read tonight for accessibility purposes, you can direct an email to poetsinpajamas@gmail.com. So we'll be happy to connect you with the poems that way. And so without further ado, I'm going in the order, sort of just the sign up order. So we'll have you first. Will Carpenter is a poet and critic currently, or just finishing an MFA in poetry at the University of Florida. And his criticism has appeared in the Denver Quarterly Review. Although he has relocated throughout his life, Will calls Calvert County, Maryland home. So thank you so much, Will.
Thank you, SJ. All right, so I'm gonna set myself a timer because I have no sense of time and I don't go wildly over. Yeah, so I don't know how to start these things, but this first poem I have is about, or based in, as are a lot of these, Southern Maryland, Calvert County. It's a place that is dear to my heart, and it's something a lot of people wouldn't really believe exists. It's a little corner island that's very rural, but mostly farms and watermen. But it's only an hour south of DC, so it's getting suburbanized sort of gradually, which comes with its challenges and heartaches and whatnot. And my buddy actually dropped out of left college at 20 years old to run for county commissioner to try to put a curb on some of this, and we campaigned out of the back of his '07 Ford Ranger, and he almost won. This is about a sort of shopping center that was put in there that I have successfully boycotted for 6 years now, I think. It's called Opening Day at Marshall's, and it's got an epigraph by Wendell Berry. It says, "The great cultural failure in the United States is to mistake millions of individual small places with their own character, their own needs and demands and use. We've mistaken them for nowhere." So, Opening Day at Marshall's. Perched on a ceiling truss, a loggerhead shrike nasals along to a Tom Petty song. Brandon's mom quit her job over this shopping center. After years of curbing construction, my friends have vanished into a stand of imported stools impersonating tree trunks. Now, as ever after, a worn-down shopping cart crabs through fluorescent aisles of athleisure wear, its lameness scorned but protected by the larger flock, rattling away while an upstart t-shirt blares, "Not my first rodeo." The long teleological chutes move us all where we are going, maintaining among the parallels a perfect harmony of brands. Suburban riot, outdoor voices, woven threads rub shoulders as shoppers shoulder by one another. Upon the dying of the crowds, the nymphos will inherit 2 clean bathrooms to bang in and a parking lot of coy penumbras. The Harris Teeter next door flaunts local corn and crabs from elsewhere in Maryland beneath the banner beckoning, "Meet your neighbor." Our county is typical. Mom and pop driven to retirement, landmark barns made seasoned lumber, the place finally impaled by pushing a pin into a map. Now we can buy metallic cowboy boots for toddlers. A man with hard, clean hands and a conductor's cap asks me which pair of loafers looks more like his own. This next one is sort of the opposite. It's based on a place near here called Stark. Stark or Waldo. They're both sort of notorious speed trap towns in north central Florida, and Calvert County, Maryland is where I'm from, but I've also lived here. This is my 3rd time living here, I think. So this is also pretty close to home. And in both places, I've noticed all I want to do is stay. But everyone around me who's really come up here just wants to get out. So I've tried to consider that viewpoint. I feel like I'm not really firm a place, and unless I can consider wanting nothing more than to leave. It's called Adolescence in a Speed Trap Town. Because the main drag of your life is a game trail, you must never appear to flee. Phone poles, fence posts, svelte pines coolly tick the miles, each a sentinel. Skinny steers groan, this is not your throughway, Rube. Produce stands, the good words of a few mechanics, and the punctual wreckage of boxcars all cling to the town's exposed ribs. Billboards bring you the world in windscreen smeared slogans, real stuff. Come twilight, you'll take off down the straight road, waving at each neighbor and merge with headlit masses going elsewhere. Next one is back in Calvert County down the south end. This is we just kids doing kid things. When I was younger, we would go to my buddy Chance's land. Chance had been living and working on his own since he was 15, 16, I think. Never went to high school or anything. He unfortunately, when he was 9 years old, shot and killed someone with a .22 who was coming on his property. His parents told grandparents who he was staying with had told him, you don't let trespassers on the property when you're alone, etc. And so by this time he had the means of an adult, but he was 18, so he had all the toys, guns, four-wheelers, trucks, you name it. And we'd go hang out on land and burn things and shoot things, and it was just sort of a lawless place. It's called The Wild Things, etc. After a third gunshot, darkness tends to its wounds, healing around reports lodged in its hide. I range out barefooted from the cold camper where I sometimes stay for free to trace scraps of trail, cleaving again the night with sleepless interest and a flashlight to let the blood from the new moon's cloying darkness, the lipid slick undergrowth. Bamboo impaled boats haunt the clearings with cabins, a school bus carcass long ago gutted, callow faces carved into crop trunks. More gunshots now and mephitic smoke. Mud closes around my ankles. A bass-laden song lumbers through a clearing, its way unsung by whippoorwills. Flame animates treetops, issuing from 2 RVs, though there's been no disaster. It's just a bunch of kids taking pot shots at bottles, waning youth, dousing the fire with moonshine and high beams. This is, sorry, just checking on my timer here. This is about the road that my family home is on. Back in Calvert County, Maryland, I promise we're going to take a turn away from there soon, if any of y'all are getting tired of it. I never do. Yeah, this is how I know that I'm home. It's called Home Drive. I could take Cheneyville Road blindfolded. I'd wager where my insurance rate's lower, where my neighbor, the deputy, to turn a civilian eye. A bumper car would help. On a dare, I drove that road one summer night with no headlights and must have driven it asleep some evenings, returning southbound. I still drive it in dreams. I've driven it tear blind from ragweed and before that because of Steve's arrest. Some stretches curve closer to my signature than anything I've scratched onto a lease. I confess Cheneyville Road is nothing written, just a capillary rooting through flesh, feeding a clotted Route 4 gridlocked at rush hour by DC Suburbans and sleek sedans. This capillary is corn-fed, track marked by black tar heroin. It must be somewhere out of the way, pivotal, intimate, the armpit or asshole of the metropolitan sketch. Steve's lawyer called our county the Wild, Wild West. For ducks, we have crossings and blinds. For tractors, patience. In the final minutes of each drive, McDonald's and Country Plaza liquors appear. We tip our caps to them, then take a sharp right toward the parking lot where the old school slouched, one story of windowless brick, and where the new school hasn't quite settled. Dented guardrails and mended fences recall friends' attempts at handbrake turns. Before Swan Farms, strawberry fields, and peach orchard, developments I never knew foretell the sinking bridge where each year the county slathers more tarmac to smooth things over. Home is not sentence, body, or distance, but road. Sorry about that. There have been so many drafts of this thing. I lumped the memory of the old in with the new. Next one's called Veneration. It's about, well, really just about the first time I lived in Calvert County when I was in 5th grade, I think. I moved away. It was really interesting to move away from all your elementary school friends and come back to all of them in high school. We found like a dead deer, and it was odd for whatever reason, being that close to a deer on the side of the road, dead without having killed it yourself, just watching it rot day after day. Veneration. We rode past on our bikes for a week, just slowing to gawk at the yearling deer's lungs crusted and ribs bleached brilliant, like sun-baked dog shit or an OxyClean t-shirt. Usually roadkills were windscreen figments, all special effects. On the 3rd day, its nose melted off. The other boys stopped slowing, but I circled back secretly, cheeks flushed with something like shame. It was the smell that drew me, nostrils molded to the sweet, the rancid twinge of burgeoning life. The deer seemed only a little tired, tongue dry and hamstrings drooping from femurs. It keeps coming back to me. My palms sweat, and I imagine pecking at its carrion roadside like fast food. All right. This next one is, I guess, based on the fact that sometime in 2016, maybe early 2017, my therapist at the time gave me, I guess, what would be called a subclinical diagnosis for psychopathy, meaning I fit all of the nonviolent traits or characteristics in the DSM for psychopathy, but didn't need, in my therapist's opinion, any treatment. Anyhow, I've only just come to realize in the past couple of years how much this sort of has influenced my thinking and relationships and emotions and all that sort of thing. And it's certainly a group that gets an interesting rap from pop culture and whatnot. And I've been very interested in sort of the representations of psychopaths in media and whatnot. It's called Psychopath. Title might change, who knows. 1. Truth is no thing caught in the throat. The quavering that barely slips the slack lip is an act made real by long practice, felt as razor against scar, deliberate as whiskey talk. In front of cops, I turn stone sober. Not all of us churn out bomb threats, riddled with puberty and mishandled Nietzsche. Relatively few microwave stray cats, though of course some do take stabs at empathy or something like it, before learning most people are born journeymen of that trade. We do tend to start with small animals. We imagine we can feel for sparrow or salamander. When that task proves ambitious, we retreat to clamshells and leaves of grass. In clenched palms, we grasp essences, chlorophyll, shellness, our own blood. Pebbles are most likely impervious to the vice grip of empathy, its violation. One ought also study movies and the behavior of siblings to learn embarrassment and other useful protocols that in time will be naturalized. I have a ways yet to go. Still, I am asked, where in my poems is the feeling, the pathos? I swear I left it right here. 2. And I hope that you will see that I care where I'm able. Your boss's sister's breast, the cancer running through it, the death of some dog, Probably a shepherd, I try to be good, hope that my wanting excuses me of hope. At funerals, I wear sadness like a black tie. The death of a child should be easiest to find, so unfathomable. So unfathomable is the draw of potential that the file unsaved held only a stanza ought to be a relief. But I do want to feel correctly. Poetry has failed to move me as I have it. I move myself methodically performing paroxysms I have practiced in the mirror the full Windsor for hours, but having tied it once, I simply slip it around my neck and tighten. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. All right, so I think I'm going to move to the last poem here. I predicted I'd go over, but not by quite this much. This is just about, well, it's sort of an amalgam of some good friends of mine. It's called Small Talk Elegy. How is the weather at your sanctum? Does thunder purr in the pasture of your raising? Wife, kids, crops, I want to hear them rattle your larynx. Of your daughter in the rye, which is now taller? Perhaps she'll grow into a proper laborer, Lord knows you won't. Assure me your friends are eating braised duck with fresh parsnips, having good sex or refraining from bad. Say something hopeless, unforgivable about the team we cheer on Sundays. What color has your neighbor painted his porch this time, and how did you get even? What is the color of your unrest? And how's the pain? Has it spread like blight? Old friend, revamp a rumor long put to bed, as we did when tending summer fires, burning for nothing but the smoke curing our words. Thank you very much, y'all. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will, for sharing those poems with us. And I'm glad we have some time in the Q&A to talk with you more. But thank you again. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Shareen Murayama. Shareen K. Murayama is a Japanese-American, Okinawan-American poet and educator. Her first poetry collection, Housebreak, debuted July 2022 by Bad Betty Press. Her first poetry chapbook, Hey Girl, Are You in the Experimental Group? By Harbor Editions, was released in April 2022. She's a poetry reader for the Adroit Journal and Cobra Milk Mag, an assistant CNF creative nonfiction editor for JMWW. I didn't look up the acronym, I'm sorry. But her works have been published or forthcoming in No Tokens Journal, Smoke Long Quarterly, the Illinois Review, Rhino Poetry, McNeese Review, and elsewhere. You can follow her on Instagram and Twitter at the handle Am Busy Poeming. And I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Here we go. All right. Again, my name is Shareen Murayama, poet, educator. I'm streaming live from the Ahupua'a of Honolulu on the ceded lands of Hawaii on the island of Oahu. Big mahalo to SJ Stout and to William and Poets in Pajamas and Sundress Press for hosting me here. So my first poem is called Body Language, and growing up here in Hawaii, we have a lot of extended family generations and many aunties and thousands of cousins. And so I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, which, you know, her family's originally from Okinawa. And there's a lot of times where we just talk about stories while we're eating food or while she's teaching me how to roll sushi, which, you know, I never got quite right. Poem, Body Language. It starts in the middle, what fills us, or in the long nerve of the thigh. Felt like a giant thumb pushing down on my back, she said. We lined mushrooms and carrots, rolled rice into sushi. I wasn't prepared to eat all I'd make ugly. A year on her knees, quilted with psalm, why? We fashioned white beds on green seaweed, a story with holes. God had fixed her back so she could stand. She omits words sons, death, doesn't know English for nervous breakdown. My window frames the moon, another tail with no body. I roll over the edge, crimp softly in showers. I ferry more words than my grandmother, yet pray for definitions, citizen, home. There's a madness running in ovals when executive threats are the spine of this country. Everything that's ugly, I want to root out, but I have faith in folktales, like my grandmother's story. Anyone could be saved or eaten, their tongues cut out. Thank you. My next poem is my first attempt at an ekphrastic poem. And for some reason, while I was doing my MFA at Oregon State University, I could never get it. Like I thought it was like some big abstract classical thing that I would never reach for. And there was a line from that movie Notting Hill where, Mark Chagall floating, it kind of feels like that painting is like how love should be. Like happiness should be like a goat playing the violin, of course. And I thought, yeah, I can reach for that kind of happiness. The Blue Circus, after the painting of the same name by Mark Chagall. How stained and cyanide is one's childhood when anticipation meets the wildest. I wield the heart commanding your attention, my green, my horse and I revel under the gold sky, coined a crescent moon for change. My fault, leaning into a fall, a blue fish sends flowers for her arrival of the heart. Tattoos trail. The sides of her pink are the last to touch the sandy area. Thank you. Okay, and this is a trigger warning here. So in 2015, my partner had passed away unexpectedly, and he was an architect and a painter. And I had always been drawn to illustrations and how they fracture a plane engine and they show all its broken bits, which is kind of like what grief is, right? Like Rilke says, it's a pushing through of the darkness. So this is me pushing through. The poem is called Fractured Plane, an Empty Defense Mechanism. It's the spaces between vertebrae that allow lizards to drop their tail. Papa's in the sky. Can we drive to him? And my skin and muscles, bloods and nerves separate, an amputation that affects my sense of balance. Like one-way texts and much too much listening on your side. The reproductive process stops. And bundles of muscle fold over exposed bone. They say the end will dry into a cap. My skin grows over a silence slit long ways. Sunflower petals roll over their crest, dried pistils and stamens, yellow curves, dotted lines. I bump into a form, another form of myself. When it grows back, the tail's not the same length or color and can't be dropped again until you nod and tell me, Papa's at home. He's just home now. Thank you. I'm gonna read exactly 1 year ago this year, last year, I had my first poetry collection published in the UK with Bad Betty Press, and the eponymous poem is called Housebreak. So let me read this poem for you. I know Diablo means devil, and Anthos means flower, what you want me to spread. Illegal entries skirt the folds of the land, it's summer, and I wait for fidelity to bloom. A stone wall, blue gravel, an off-ramp to take, I call attention to everything but you. You say tongue and peninsula, and I think baby doll and betrayal, what I long for weekendly, I breathe in, count backwards from you. They say to check on your loved ones, but there are worse symbols I could inflict. What I learned from my mother, my father's face is a sidewalk, peppered with flyers, a pocket empty of coins and sounds. My face as placeholder for sporting events, coffee stains on a coffee table. Never have I thrown a fight. My father's face lines mines over time, the warmth of your hand, the sag of a roof. I wonder if they can be saved. At the start of relationships, I vacillate if I can pass on love. And when loyalty spins too domestic, I imagine its blades are initials notched on bamboo. Insert only the parts of me I can sacrifice. Thank you. Ooh. Okay, so yes, poetry for me was it. I like to believe that I'm as faithful as I can be to poetry, but the worlds kind of collide, and sometimes like the poems that are not quite up to par, I can kind of mesh them around a little and they become like Flash, and everybody's like, wow, that's so lyrical. I'm like, yeah, they don't know it's really a failed poem, but hey, an argument could be made that one is or isn't the other, and so here we go. This was printed in Fractured Literature's Anthology 1. And for me, when people say, well, what inspires you to write? Sometimes it's like just this image, that I can't get out of my head. And I start thinking about the what ifs. And I saw an image of a video of cows in a semi truck that had fallen over. Like, we don't truck anything here on our island. We bring everything by boat. And so when that happened, I was like, wow, what happened to all the cows? Are they okay? And where did they land? And what happened? And who was driving? Thursday night at Lucky's liquor store. When the semi flipped on its side, cows were launched like bowling pins across multiple lanes. Several died inside the truck. Eventually, many uprighted like dice. The driver lay dying, his belly forming pleats on the steering wheel. After slamming into an ice freezer, a brown and white heifer shook its head. Some were caught 4 miles down the highway, its diminishing lines going somewhere, going nowhere. The dying driver wished his girlfriend could know the squeeze of his hand. Her stained lips that hung on his bathroom mirror would close the night for him. Maybe if he weren't dying, she'd reconsider his question. Outside, the hooven beats padded nothing like police or ambulance, just glacial, where the inflating, the shattered cab. For 3 days, she had ghosted him through mud-turned fields, snow sugared on windshield. Even wipers lied. Come back, come back. Even if she occasionally squeaked too much whiskey, never dividing equally his and hers, he was everything she didn't want for the long ride. Before the trailer tipped over like cows, before the cows burst through the roof like a birthday cake surprise, he remembered how he'd gifted her open stars, piped buttercream around a silver band. The brown and white appeared on the other side of the shattered glass, how he wished they could see the view from his side. Muted lights or setting stars, the gauzy snow lacing his eyes shut. Thank you. Okay, I have 2 more pieces to read. And this one here, because, everyone's working on a novel. Every writer that I know, I'm working on my novel. So am I, yours truly. And this in here, the novel is actually like a hybrid, and it's about the Okinawan girls working in the silk factories in the early 1900s. And their work and sacrifice contributed to Japan's success as a #1 exporter of silk in the world. And the young girls were recruited in Okinawa. They came from very rural, very farm poor families. And this was a flash fiction piece that was published in Smoke Long Quarterly. Mother warns us of men. Like the sun, father disappears every day after work, after drinking too much awamori. He hurricanes other spirits with spirits. He once twisted the neck of 2 half-eyed kittens, so leafy, their bones. But what do we know of love, of fish thrashing on shore? I too am afraid to wake up in foreign spaces. To save our necks, mother teaches us to walk with our hoe face down. My sisters and I forget that we carry the same ears. We are waiting like fishing poles for something to move us. Mother calls it saving face. Will it hurt? We ask, imagining our heads paraded for other families to approve, to wed. We are waiting to use our faces. When Yuta comes over, she armors father's body with songs of victory. Warrior or demon, we are not sure which one is father. And in our dreams, we offer him our faces as shields, even though they are meaty, like the underside of peaches. Father dislikes peaches. In our dream, father loses our love. He loses his face. Every fall, we pull the fallen leaves, dried like kittens. We raise our heads and jump into battle. And when father comes home through the sickness, mother greets him with her whole face down. Thank you. Okay, so now we are on my last poem, and this is new. This is not published, but it's okay. This is, it was inspired by my nephew's birthday is tomorrow. I think my sister is still online. She might still be listening. Yes, she is. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of times, a lot of my inspiration comes from family folklore. This one here. Your presence is not required, but you still show up while sitting in my car at the car wash. My nephew's 8th birthday is tomorrow, and I need to pick up a gift, even though my sister's invite says no presents needed. It's his first party since his baby shower, even though technically he was there, but not there. They say education begins in the home. I mean, is it only me wanting to give, maybe receive that one gift that evokes an animal scream of joy? I'm not sure what that's supposed to sound like. I do know I love the sound of the word mitigation. My teeth, tongue, and jaw working toward a common goal, parceling destruction from self-preservation. A father circles his son, says, love you, boy. And I want a different father, a bicycle, a fishing rod, a tennis racket in need of strings. That could be a happy story, couldn't it? The practice of quiet quitting screens out the world and loneliness. When I think of touch starvation, I too want to be a car dogged by a chain, engine off, no braking. When I think of joy, I still want a different father. A million blue strapped spaghetti over me, slapping my back like the world's just messing with me, saying, we didn't mean you. When talking about the standards for success, I shift in my bucket seat. There's something wrong when I use touched and slapped as synonyms. In black and white movies, a house will fall on a bad witch, causing me to look up to myself, say, love you, girl, you got this, even though I'm not sure what I'm supposed to fetch. In black and white movies, a monkey or a pig will fly. Happiness could land on anyone, couldn't it? Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. That was fantastic, Shareen. Thank you so much for sharing those poems. Yeah, that was a real treat. And thanks again, everyone, for listening to Will and Shareen read. The QA part of our event is open for any questions that you all have. I do like to start things off typically, and if folks have been here before, they know that I like to ask, often like to ask what you guys are reading. So I would love to hear, what are you reading these days from both of you? And yeah, what's on your bookshelf that you're really excited about right now?
Will, do you want to go first?
If you want me to, you're welcome to.
Well, I did my homework for this one, like in preparation, right? I was like, oh, what can I show? So I am reading currently Shanae Newsom James' Surrender Dorothy and the Spell. Maybe I should like unblur my background. Okay, Surrender Dorothy, and this is by Bad Betty Press. I'm also reading Candace Kelsey's The Poet Dreams of Driving a Ding-a-ling Ice Cream Truck and Other Means of Escape. Because gotta love that title. Candace is just a brilliant poet. And then of course I just checked out Hawaii's newest poet laureate, Brandy Nalani McDougall's poetry collection, Aina Hanau, Birthland. And so these I'm excited, and I've been dog-earing certain pages and underlining, and I just love learning from poets.
If this is my cue, I have been reading not enough lately because I just finished the MFA, but gladly learning to read for pleasure again. I would say my favorite books that I've read lately are Wendell Berry's The Art of Loading Brush. It's his second newest book. I think he put out I see a thumbs up from Irene. I taught that to I was lucky enough to teach a special topics course that I got to design called let's see, it was called Mistaken for Nowhere, which is pulled from actually the epigraph I read to you in the first poem, rural America and what it means for all of us. And I taught that to my students who seemed to really enjoy it. And then another book I taught in that class that has stuck with me and I've read and whatnot is called Appalachian Reckoning. It's an anthology assembled in response to J.D. Vance's very controversial Hillbilly Elegy. A lot of people in Appalachia were either not so happy with that, or they at least felt the need to respond. And they did in this anthology, which is just gorgeous. And then I recently read a tiny little book called The Hatred of Poetry by Ben Lerner, which I bought for the title. And I was in Dublin. I saw that on a shelf of a bookstore. I bought that immediately, and it did not disappoint. And it's it starts out with the Marianne Moore, I too dislike it, and goes from there.
Nice. I've heard of Ben Lerner's book, but I hadn't heard of, I don't think of hardly any of the other titles of book mentioned. So I have my little post-it note. I'm taking notes.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat for, what was that name of the Appalachian book that you were?
Appalachian Reckoning. Eddie,
the anthology.
In there as well. Yes. I believe it's by Meredith McCarroll and Anthony Harkins, I think.
Irene also has a question in the chat, and I'll read it out loud too. Irene asks, you both work in multiple genres, Will, poetry and criticism, Shareen, the lot. How does working in other genre affect or impact your poems or poetry practice?
Will?
I would say I'm difficult at work, I have difficulty working with concepts. Things always occur to me in details.
Mm.
Teaching has helped me greatly in understanding things through concepts, through more macro level ideas. And criticism, I think, helps with the same. I called myself a critic in my bio because that's like the one thing I've published, but I'm really not much of anything besides someone who's trying. But writing criticism, I do feel that I'm able to understand a little bit more about the poetry I write, beyond the sort of mosaic of details that makes it up. And I'm able to think about it sort of, think about poems beyond sort of the individual scale, and think about them in terms of how they operate overall versus the words that make them up, which is still my primary mode.
Mm.
And I think probably it's more obvious how writing poetry affects my criticism, but I hope that it affects it well beyond the realm of taste and of preference. I like to think I learn, especially in revision of poems, about what goes on in poetry that I can offer a critique of. That's a good
Mm.
question. Thank you,
Yeah.
Irene.
Awesome. I think for me, it's kind of interesting. Like I vacillate among all the different genres, but I think ultimately everyone's looking for like, well, can it be more specific and more detailed? Like there's always a story about grief or loss, but then can it be different, right? With the specific details. And at the same time, everybody also wants it to be universal, like something that others can relate to. And so I guess those are the two threads that I always kind of keep in mind, no matter the genre. Thanks for that question, Irene.
In that case, I would doubly recommend the Little Ben Lerner book. It takes less than an afternoon to read, and it seems to concern that exact sort of tension.
If folks are still thinking of questions, I might pop in with one more. So this might be a macro question, Will, but this is for both of you. Place obviously figures very heavily in both of your poems in very different ways, I think. So I just wanted to hear more in general about your all's relationship with place, like what you take from your surrounding, or how does place, I guess, just figure into your poems? How do you think about that, if at all?
Shareen, do you want this one, or do you want a little time to think?
Yeah, let me gather my thoughts on this one so I don't just ramble. Sound like a complete idiot. Thanks.
I have a lot of. I'll try not to resort to sound bites on this one because it was a heavy portion of that class I taught that's been definitely my most rewarding teaching experience, and one of the more rewarding experiences I've ever had. I encourage my students to think about place as it is relevant to their lives, and I think it seems sort of straightforward to me, but it has not been to them because they have so many interactions that could be considered placeless. I'm talking to you time zones away right now, and it doesn't seem on the surface that the places that we're in affect these interactions. And I encourage my students to think of the ways that they might, the ways that my being in Florida and my being attached to Southern Maryland affect the Hawaiian and Houston connections here as well as others. And I've always had a sort of complicated relationship because I felt my moving around throughout my childhood. A lot of people deal with this a lot better. I'm sort of a baby about it, but it really like messed me up. I was routinely every couple of years being torn away from all the people that I cared about and all the landscapes that I cared about. And so I feel like I've put a good deal of conscious effort into constructing some sort of coherent sense of identity based on places, but I still feel the need to fixate on one or two places among those. So I feel it's very intimately tied to who I am, but in a way in a very different way from that of, say, someone who was born somewhere and grew up there, which the grass is always greener, but I can't help but envy that a little bit.
Thanks. Wow. Yeah, I think that's a little interesting because I hear home or specific places like from your poems that or it sounds so specific, like that one poem about your drive home, and so I think that even though as traumatizing as it was for you to move constantly, I think some of your strong pieces definitely come from wherever you're situated at that time or what you're longing for, which is, I think, kind of interesting to see, like, from someone who's never moved, right? I'm wondering if you need that distance in order to appreciate where you're coming from or what you've just left. It's that space thing where it's like, when my mom was alive, it was like we always got along better when I lived farther away from her, like that distance, that space. And so I'm wondering if that's also true to an appreciation of a place. I think it's interesting because as I'm studying a little bit more flash fiction, like trying to get a specific place, it doesn't happen in, that short under 700, 500 words kind of piece. And yet when you look at these pieces, sometimes it's not a specific place, but like it could be a girl that's standing in a bank line, right? But you still get all that details where the subtext is there, like where this place is. And I think here for Hawaii, it might be a little bit different, I think, than poems with titles that do a lot of the heavy lifting can also help. And I think also each writer just carries what they take from that place. Like for me, I gravitate towards family and lineage and folklore and animals and all of those things, and they come out through the sense of my poems. So thanks for that question. Great question.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes. So if anyone does have a question, I would love to hear y'all's answers to anything. So if anyone has a question, please ask it now. Otherwise, I will just thank you all again for reading and sharing your work. I dropped the links to Shareen's publications in the chat. So please support if you can. This was, a wonderful reading. And it was just so fantastic to hear y'all's work and how they are similar and different. That the relationship to place, I think, is fascinating, how it appears in your all's work in such a big way, but in such a different way. But this has been fantastic. I also want to remind folks that we have another Poets in Pajamas at the end of this month. It's also Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And that's 6 p.m. Central and so on. And that's going to be with poets Bohi Moon and Ashai Ajani. So please come back and listen to them as well. But in the meantime, thank you both again for this reading. It was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much for the wonderful reading, the wonderful hosting, and the wonderful questions. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
You as well. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye.